In the early 1970s, a scientific research team ventured deep into the wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. Their mission was simply to catalog and observe various flora and fauna of the region, to better understand how adaptive changes affected the ecosystem. The team was comprised of 6 members, each specializing in different fields. The head of the expedition was a zoologist by the name of Nathan Matthews. He was an older man in his early 50s. All records leading up to the excursion indicated that he was a man of few words, but well respected in his own right. Cheryl Helcom was the senior botanist on the team. According to records, she was well liked by her peers and was quite charismatic. Don Rhodes was the assistant botanist to Cheryl. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of information was recovered regarding the man. Frank Garrett was a park ranger who had been tasked with assisting the team in locating research sites. His primary job was to provide security, more so dealing with the plethora of dangerous wildlife in the area. A biologist by the name of Randall Haynes is next in line. According to past reports, it would seem in his spare time, Randall liked to gamble quite a bit. When he wasn't in a lab or in the field, you'd most likely find him crowding a blackjack table, or so it was described. Finally, the last member of the research team was a young woman by the name of Debbie Andrews. She was the team's entomologist. Much like Don Rhodes, there wasn't a whole lot of history regarding her. There were a few excerpts that led investigators to believe she was relatively new in the field, possibly a college student or newly graduated. The reason there is relatively little information regarding the researchers was that they all came from different locations across the country. Investigators tried to dig deeper into their pasts, but could only get some decent information on half of them. In the summer of 1972, the team ventured into the woods and were never seen again. After a number of weeks had passed, the only person to notify the authorities regarding the matter was one of Frank's associates, who also happened to be a park ranger. Apparently, there had been no scientific excursions orchestrated during that time. The other scientists who happened to work in those fields, and even a few who knew some of the members of the team, stated that it wasn't something that had been tasked from a third party. Well, as far as they knew. Most had assumed that the lead, Dr. Matthews, wanted to conduct a research expedition on his own, and gathered up some of the other interested parties to join him. The search for the missing team lasted for 4 months. Despite their best efforts in locating any sign of the team, they came up empty-handed. However, during the final month of searching, they did find something of interest. There was what seemed to be a journal that had been shoved into a hole of a tree. This find prompted another 3 weeks of search in that area, before the case had been ultimately closed. While the overall situation seemed chilling and mysterious in its own right, the contents of that journal proved to be even more disturbing. Through some means I won't get into, I had acquired a copy of the journal. It should be noted that it isn't clear who exactly wrote the journal, but I think it had been penned by Dr. Matthews. Also, due to weathering, some of the pages had been damaged beyond comprehension. I'm not sure why I feel so compelled to transcribe this. Maybe I just want them not to be lost to time. Maybe it's just sheer morbid fascination in the story. Maybe it's both. Either way, I will do my best to lay out the contents of the journal. July 17th, 1972. I had always been aware of the vastness of nature in this part of the country, but to actually stand before it, it's safe to say I have been humbled by its magnitude. The others seem just as eager as myself to head on in, but I must maintain my bearing, not just for the others' sake, but for myself as well. July 19th, 1972. So far, most of our expedition has only been travel. When you're traveling in a group, time seems to slip away. Unfortunately, we haven't even made it to our first site, so aside from some passive observation, nothing has truly gotten done. Still, I'm hopeful that our efforts will be rewarded tenfold. July 20th, 1972. We've made it to our first site, Good thing too, because I think Don was about to lose it if we had to trek for another day. His high spirits seemed to have returned though. Not just him, but this was a much needed morale boost for the entire team. July 25th, 1972. We found some isolated micro-ecosystems in certain areas. More research needed to be sure, but this was an incredible find. Frank has been on edge since last night. Apparently something had stirred him from his sleep and he has been agitated ever since. I'm going to keep an eye on him. July 27th, 1972. Something odd had occurred last night. We were all woken up at roughly midnight to the sounds of Frank shouting into the woods. Upon exiting our tents to inquire, Frank pointed out between the trees. None of us were able to see what he was pointing at, mainly due to the lack of light in the area. After a while, we managed to calm Frank down. We asked him what he saw, and he said there was a person walking around in the woods. July 28th, 1972. Frank has calmed down a bit. Not very reassuring to have our ranger lose his head, that's to be sure. Hopefully he'll be able to regain his composure, at least enough to lead us to our next destination. July 30th, 1972. Something happened. Debbie Andrews had gotten separated from the group during our travels. We've spent the day searching for her, but we're unable to track her down. We're still heading to site number 2. Once we get there and set up camp, we'll be able to perform a more thorough search. July 31st, 1972. We had made it to Site 2, and found something inexplicable. Debbie had arrived before us, though that didn't seem possible. As we approached her, we discovered something was wrong. Debbie Andrews was dead. What was even stranger was that her body seemed to be decaying at an astonishing rate. Parts of her body seemed to be turning to ash and crumbling away. We had no idea what caused this, so we're going to have a discussion on what to do next. August 1st, 1972. We decided it would be best to cut our excursion short for the sake of safety. However, sometime during the night, Frank had gone missing. When we all left our tents, we found Frank's to be vacant. After calling his name for a few hours, it was apparent that he wasn't nearby. Much to the others' dismay, I made the decision to start our journey back. August 2nd, 1972. During our walk through the forest, I thought I saw someone walking through the trees adjacent to us. It was difficult to see, but I'm sure of it. What's more was that they appeared to be wearing a black cloak or dress of some kind. After passing by some trees and looking again, the figure seemingly had vanished. Something strange is happening. August 5th, 1972. Half of our remaining party has gone missing. I'm at a loss for words. We had been steadily camping and moving over the past few days. But last night, 2 more of our members had mysteriously vanished. It's just myself and Randall now. He seems visibly shaken at the recent events. I've tried my best to reassure him, though I'm not sure I can convince myself, let alone another person. We have to make it back. We must make it back. August 6th, 1972. I saw it last night. I haven't slept much since the event started, and upon losing the majority of the team, sleep seems like a distant memory. I heard rustling outside of my tent at roughly 1 in the morning. I quietly peeked my head out to look around. I saw Randall standing outside his tent, but he wasn't alone. That same shadowy figure was standing right next to him. It raised a hand and rested it upon Randall's shoulder. I'm not sure, but it seemed like the skin on his neck and face was beginning to turn black. After a few moments, Randall turned to the forest and began walking, almost as if he were in a trance. The figure turned to my tent and I focused my attention on it. The long white beak that protruded out from the hood around its head was iconic. It was something so strange and yet so familiar at the same time. This person before me was, in fact, a plague doctor. The black glass that covered the eyes shimmered in the faint starlight. Despite its connection to medical practices, I felt nothing but dread when looking upon this form. Before it could reach out to me, I grabbed my journal and I ran out of there as fast as I could. August 7th, 1972. This might very well be my last entry. I've tried my best to escape the mysterious figure that has taken my team from me. I have no theories as to its purpose or how it's doing what it's doing. It seems every time I stop to take a breath, I can see it steadily closing the distance. I'm going to hide this journal somewhere. Hopefully someone will find it and will be able to flee before it's too late. I guess now all I can do is pray it'll all be over quickly. That was the last entry in the journal. There were more in between the logs, but those had become illegible due to weather damage. I'm not sure who or what this ominous plague doctor could be, but if these entries are to be believed, then it's probably best to stay away from the forests of the Pacific Northwest. Who knows? It might still be out there, looking for people to venture into those woods, never to be seen or heard from again.